So he was born in upstate New York in Johnson City. He has a BFA and MFA from Kent State University. He designed a typeface named Fur in 1994 and established his New York City-based office, known as the Office of Paul Sahre, in 1997. Sahre has done numerous illustrations for the New York Times and created illustrations for other publications such as Newsweek, The New Yorker, and Esquire. On top of his numerous designs and his consulting agency, Sahre also teaches graphic design at the School of Visual Arts in New York City.
Sorry I'm a little late. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing the rain.
I brought it. I guess so. The weather just really went south in New York. Is the screen? There we go. You can find me here.
They're over here. It's on this side. I got it.
Okay, so thank you again. Let's test the sound here because I have sound right out of the gate.
Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest is a journalist, critic, and best-selling author of books like Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. His latest book, But What If We're Wrong? Thinking About the Present as If It Were the Past, is in stores Tuesday. Please welcome to the show, Chuck Klosterman.
Can everybody hear that? It's as loud as it goes, sorry.
Welcome.
It's great to be here.
Let's get this out of the way that I have not been holding the book incorrectly.
You have not.
So this is how you wanted the book, and was this a tough sell to your publisher to do an upside-down book?
Well, okay, when you write a book and they come up with the cover, like, I don't have any ideas for this. Somebody else has ideas.
Right.
And they bring you 5 or 6 prototypes. And they show the 5, and then this was the last one. And the design guy was like, this is the cover we want to use, you know? And some people, like my editor was like, I love it. And my agent was like, oh, I don't know. And all these people in the room had differing opinions. And I was basically like, well, what's the track record of upside-down books?
Yeah.
Like, have they succeeded in the past? Because I don't care about the cover. Like, I write the inside cover. I don't care. So we thought, that's a good question. And as it turns out, we could not find one other example.
This is the first upside-down book.
There are books where the title is upside down or the image is upside down, but never the whole thing. So then I was like, now we must do it.
Yeah.
Like, if it's never been done,
Right.
we have to see what will
It's
happen.
rare in this life to be the first person to do something like that.
I still don't believe I am, but we can't find
You
the other
can't find it,
example.
and no one's
so-
coming forward.
Yeah.
So this book is interesting in that you...
I don't know if you heard that. Anyway, this makes me the design guy. But that was Chuck Klosterman. I've designed a number of covers for Chuck, and I can tell you it's very rare that a cover design is being discussed right out of the gate on national TV, but it happens occasionally. Anyway, I prefer graphic designer, but a lot of times we don't have that much control over what we're called, do we? As was mentioned, I've had a design practice in New York City for the last going on 25 years now, so I've been doing this for quite a while. I call my office the Office of Paul Sahre, or OOPS, and I had an office. There have been multiple locations, but I've always concentrated on keeping it small. It's just given me a lot more control over the work that I do. Does anyone know what this is? This is not my office. This is the Unabomber's cabin. It's in a museum in D.C. That's very weird. Anyway, there's some similarities. Anyway, I've been in different places over the years, and as I said, I've never gotten bigger than maybe 4 or 5 people. When it even gets to that size for me, I feel like I have less control over things and I get to make less. You know, I go to meetings more and making less. So I've always kept it small. Right now it's just me and 1 employee. The desks are old art school surplus with a million names scratched in. I have a nose cone to a Nike Hercules surface-to-air missile in my office to intimidate the clients. Books are really important to me as well. Anyway, so bottom line, not this, and certainly not this. I kind of connect with this guy or girl a little bit more. So you get the idea. Anyway, over the years, by keeping it small, I would probably say you sort of gravitate toward doing smaller projects. And so I've without a conscious plan, designed many, many book covers over the years. I'm going to click through these fairly quickly. 2000. I love designing book covers. For me, it's always sort of a really singular design challenge. You're responding to something, which I always feel like I'm doing on some level. I read a lot, and while certainly part of the process, the selling of the book, the jacket's responsibility in selling the book has never been that interesting to me. I'm much more interested in the cover as sort of a doorway into some experience someone's going to have. 1996. This was my first book cover I ever did, actually. And the subject matter is always changing. Autobiography by the comedian Patton Oswalt. This was a book on the last mass lynching in the United States. And I've been doing a lot of covers for the venerable New York publisher New Directions, and they do a lot of non-American authors. And these are a number of covers I've done for them recently. This fantastic little book by Rivka Galchen on motherhood. And then in this case, I've also been doing a lot of covers for the great Brazilian author Clarice Lispector. And so these are English translations, Brazilian author, English translations, so it's sort of broadening her audience in a way. And then, usually it's an individual book, but in this case I was asked to redesign 4 of her titles, so it gave us the opportunity to focus more on the author than the individual book, so they sort of, And as again, and this is the back covers. Again, I'm not really that concerned with the kind of the marketing aspect of it, but I will tell you that it's very rare where someone will just buy one of these. They always buy 4, so they've been doing quite well apparently, even when it's not the focus. But one thing I wanted to kind of mention here quickly, this is another cover for Chuck Klosterman, is that every single thing I'm going to show you today is probably overly considered. I have a very strong background in basic two-dimensional design, where I was first introduced to April's work in college. And so every single thing I do has a lot of logic to it in terms of its composition. This is another cover. So even with something as simple as this, there's usually a really strong internal logic to the work. It's almost always in there. And hopefully you don't see it when you're just experiencing the thing. Another thing that I've kind of gravitated into doing over the years is illustration work. A lot of it, especially at the beginning for the New York Times, again, not by any plan. An art director had seen some work at the Times, had seen some works I was doing. So in the late 90s, I started doing these little quick op-ed illustrations for the Times. And so they were either something that ran with letters to the editor, or they were a piece that ran with an opinion piece. And again, these have been really an interesting challenge. They're very different. Working on an op-ed piece, one, because the budgets are so small and the turnaround is so quick, you might have an afternoon to do one of these things. That the thought process and the way I approach it as a designer is very, very different. And again, the subject matter is always changing. This actually ran in the New York Times. This was on the lack of Arab translators for the United States military, shrinking banks, boring books, exaggerated pharmaceutical claims, kind of switching the relationship between the car and the bike. A piece about ideas, I guess. And now, over the years, I've started to do illustration for many, many publications now. A few were mentioned earlier. This one was for the New Yorker on how there are large conglomerates who are buying and managing and dictating content to local news organizations. Anniversary of 9/11. So with my book covers, I have I've always had a very kind of any graphic means necessary to get at something approach, as you can see. This was for the Times Magazine. Some of these things have started to move on how we're searching for company out in the cosmos. This was for the New York Times Magazine on the birth of Twitter. So it was just this kind of running with this war. Apparently it wasn't, it was pretty chaotic. And that's the cover. And there were a bunch of little spots here. I was telling the art director I could still be doing these every single day for the rest of my life and be happy. In terms of the illustration too, as I said, the thinking's a lot different. It's much quicker. So I wanted to show you a little my process. It's pretty simple. I do really terrible drawings and send them to an art director. And what I want is I want these drawings to be so bad that the art director can't think of them as how I would actually execute the thing. So I want to talk about ideas first. Then I want to talk about how something should be executed. This is probably the world's worst drawing of Albert Einstein. And this is just an example of how a sketch can become a final piece. Actual conversation with the art director, or a request I should say, in the middle of making this thing, he asked me if I could make the birds look like they were more into it. I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that. And if you're wondering, the last 4 years, I guess 3 years, it seems like a lot longer, there's been a lot of opportunity because of all the knuckleheads that are now running our government, from Kellyanne Conway as Joseph Goebbels, the former head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt. It's always they're very similar characters too. This is Scavino. He's Trump's new media czar or something, but he's the guy who actually hits send on the tweets. But he's this kind of shadowy guy. No one knows who he used to be Trump's golf caddy. And this was one that was for the July 4th. Somebody wrote and said, I love this, but I'm afraid he'd like it. I'm like, of course he would like it. Of course he would like it, Jesus. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to do things that weren't there for the 8 years previous. I'll just say that. This is a piece I just finished for the New York Times Magazine on the impeachment thing, where the branches of government sort of just all-out war against each other. Anyway, so I recently, and I have a couple copies to give away here at the end, I recently wrote a memoir, a graphic design memoir. It's called Two-Dimensional Man, and it ties into a larger theme I want to talk about, this idea of live long in graphic design. and I think for me, it comes down to why we make decisions as designers, why I make decisions as designers, and why, in the end, keep doing it for a sustained period of time. A little diversion here. There's a map in the inside front cover. This also relates to the current situation. I had designed this map years ago. I was asked by a paper company to design my area of the United States, the Northeast, and I could do anything I wanted with it. So I did a future version, right? So this is the future, and I wanted to include it in the book, but then I realized I had done this 5 or 6 years ago. The future I had envisioned was very different now. I felt like it was totally changed since Trump was in office. So I had to, on the fly, sort of reimagine it. Anyway, the Northeast of the United States in 2412 is a series of islands. USA is now called New SA. There's a lot of Russian translations. This is a terrible Russian translation with Trump's mouth that said pit, translates basically to pit of despair. Kanye is a deity, but of course we already knew that. And Canada is now Bananda. But see, this is how quickly it goes. Like, the thing was published and then he was out. So, I don't know, it still might happen. Giuliani and Christie are up there next to Saskatoon. I did not think Giuliani was going to be featuring so heavily. He was totally shoved aside right after the election, and with glee, for me anyway, being a New Yorker. All these New Yorkers, the worst New Yorkers, all the good New Yorkers nationally can't get elected anything. It's all the worst. Like Giuliani and Trump, it's incredible. Anyway, Americans. So the book is, well, what's the book about? It's about graphic design. It's about a graphic designer, me, I suppose, and how someone can get obsessed with the things we're obsessed with, typography and semiotics and composition. This is the Sahre family in 1970. I am number 3 there. My dad was an aerospace engineer, and my mom was an occupational therapist, so graphic design was not the family business, let's just say. But the book revolves around basically my 2 brothers and me. Greg was my older brother, number 1, and Angus, number 4, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. Right now. This is my brother Greg's room now. He lives in the house we grew up in upstate New York. He's deaf. He also has a learning disability of some kind of undiagnosed thing. I think he's 60 now. But this stuff's been on his wall in his room since 1973, since we moved in there. He puts stuff up, he never takes anything down. But the thing about Greg, he makes things. He's a maker. In fact, he was the first graphic designer in the family. I'll call him that. Anyway, but the things he makes are different from the things I make, in that I make things, if you think about a New York Times illustration, a lot of people see them, but it's temporary. He makes permanent things for nobody, just for himself, because he wants to make them, or it's a gift. This was a gift from my wife, Emily, pencil holder. When we go upstate to visit, he'll do these elaborate type chalk drawings in the driveway. He just recently mowed the name of my 2 boys in the front lawn for one of our visits in Comic Sans, it looks like. He's not fooling around. He does these HO scale scenarios where he paints the billboards and the backdrops. I dug this thing up. This is from 1976, so I would have been 12 at the time. Greg would have been maybe 16. But he's a bowler, and so he was designing all the logos for his bowling league. I especially like that one. But Greg's go-to medium is this plastic canvas needlepoint. I don't know if you know what this is, but they sell these plastic grids and you knit yarn in it and you can make designs. This was a box, and so you can make three-dimensional objects too. And this was, my brother does these tissue box cozies. So you just take this thing and put it over the tissue box. But this is one he made for me. It's been in my studio for years. People come in and look at that. Oh my God, that's amazing. My brother made that. Can you make one for me? I'm like, I'll let me check. No, he won't. I've offered him money. He won't do it. He's stubborn. I guess the mood has to strike him. Anyway, around 2000, I think, George Bush was in office. He had made this one. This is the hand sign for sign language for "I love you." So he did this kind of super ultra positive "I love you" tissue box, and my first reaction to it was, "Oh my God, it looks like a symbol for a gay deaf cult." And then I got thinking about it a little bit more, and obviously this was not Greg's intent. I still felt like, well, this is totally powerful, and I wanted to play with my reaction to it. So without telling him, I took it, sort of made it a symbol, and then went about trying to spread it for years. I came up with a name for it. It was called Spreading the Love. There was this was a MySpace project, so I allowed people to have an editable PDF so people would personalize it and then use their little icon. We did stickers and patches and buttons, and sent them to anybody who asked for them. And it was all over the place for a while there. And I showed this to Greg one day, and he just was totally confused by this. He had no idea why I'd be interested in doing this. And maybe I didn't really even know why I was doing it either. But I'm always really, as I said, I'm really interested in motives. And I would always ask my brother, like, why do you make this stuff? Like, what's going on? And he's sort of confused by that too. But I did get this out of him once. He said, it has to get done, which I think is really beautiful. He just has a compulsion to make, so he does. And he doesn't really think about it much, which I wish I didn't. Anyway, the back cover is me, or a designer at a computer terminal on fire. I realize I have spent a lot of time over the years staring at screens. You guys just do it probably without thinking about it. I was lucky enough to be in school when they were teaching the old-fashioned way before the Macintosh, and then the Macintosh came in right when I was maybe a junior. So I had to learn the old way, and then was sort of a facilitator for some of this stuff over the years, weirdly. But anyway, I've stared at a lot of screens over the years, so I just want to go run through some of the screens I've stared at. I've stared at this, this. April, you're going to have nightmares about this. This is all your fault, right? Stared at this. Stared at this, stared at this, still love that tower, stared at many of these, stared at this, and now I'm staring at this. And if you're wondering, Greg does stuff on the computer, but he's rocking Windows 95 on a IBM ThinkPad. Fuck you, Apple. Anyway, yeah, you'll just have to excuse anybody. You'll see, that's all I have to tell you. You'll see. But the end result of all this is I could care less about any update. I am like in my studio with CS4, like building, virtual brick walls around things because I don't want anything changing anymore. I mean, really, there's not that much difference what you can do now than what you could do 5 years ago. And it definitely becomes clear that it's about something else. Oops, how did this get in here? My favorite poster of all time. So any of the work here, if I've done it right, you don't see the influences that April's work have had on me creatively. But if you look carefully, I think you can see some of it. But thank you, April. I can say this out loud. Anyway.
It has to get done.
It has to get done. Changing gears, convenience. I've noticed that maybe this ties into the slides I was just showing, but I tend to, from my time at Kent State University as an undergrad, been interested in things like silkscreen while the computer was coming in. We sort of forget about this, and I do too, but the computer really, at the beginning of my career, was a way to rebel and to take control away from whoever had control over things in terms of being a graphic designer, because you knew what this thing was, and a lot of established designers didn't know how to operate a computer and or think that they were going to last, I would say, at the beginning. So here I am as a grad student at Kent State University doing silkscreen, which was a dying print medium. So a lot of people thought I was crazy printing. And so what I was doing was, when I left grad school, I reached out to a theater in Baltimore, Maryland, where I moved, and started designing pro bono posters for this theater, and then printing them as well. I just remember many designers at the time going, "Are you crazy? Why are you printing your work? Ew." And so I've always been a Luddite, I suppose. Anyway, these are some of the posters that I designed. These were all done between 1990 and 1995. I printed 100 of these. They got put up around town. Most of the time they got stolen. And this body of work led to me doing book covers directly. Art directors started seeing these and started giving me calls. But silkscreen has always been a part of my practice in one form or another. That's one of the last ones I did. So I'm jumping around chronologically here, but in terms of my illustration and most of my design work, I do a lot of work on the computer. If I ever get it, I'll get off this quickly, sorry. Gross. There's days when I have an assistant out looking for a dead pig's head for an illustration, so that we're in the studio stuffing this book and this thing. What we did when we were done with it? I just had my intern take it down to the trash on the corner and put it in there. The thing was this big. And then I don't know what happened to it. People interact with the garbage cans in New York City, let's just say that. This was a piece for the New York Times Magazine, and it ran with an article about scientists trying to develop a genetically less allergic peanut. So, hot glue and actual peanuts, and then bring it into the computer to color it and things like that. I think the title was a tarnished British crown, so it's a British crown made out of duct tape. This was something I was invited to do by Stefan Sagmeister. He had an exhibition, and he developed this cool thing out in front of the gallery, which was this kind of enclosed street window. And they sealed the doors, and then they developed a system for boiling water in there to steam up the windows. And then he asked designers to come in and put typography on the windows. during the run of the exhibition. And he just asked everybody to use one of the things he's learned in his life so far. So I took the shortest one, assuming is stifling, and then I can't really explain why I picked Frankfurter Highlight, but I did. And I planned out this system. Well, I wanted something with round terminals. I really like the idea of trying to put typography in Steam that looked perfect, you know? So there's 3 different windows, and then the terminals all relate to the type sizes. So the way I would do it is I'd pop a circular item in these different spots, and then it would give me the outline in which to design the letter form. And it took 20 minutes to put it in, then about 5 minutes it would all evaporate, and then you have to start over again. So it was sort of performance art too. It's kind of a cool thing. And it happens with book covers too. This was a comp that I did using a stock photo I found somewhere for another Chuck Klosterman cover called Invisible Man. And, you know, once this got approved, I could have faked it, but I really wanted to make it. So we did that with vinyl type, and that's the final cover. Although it does lead to sort of interesting things. That photo I was using there was a stock photo, and so then I'm like having to find that exact corner somewhere in the world. You wouldn't think it would be that hard. We found it in Baltimore, Maryland. My friend Michael Northrup shot this, but that's pretty close. It's the little victories that make it all worth it. Also, in terms of this idea of convenience, you know, books certainly aren't and designing books aren't the most convenient thing in the world, I suppose, at this point, but I love designing books, and I've continued doing it. I was asked to redesign 3 of Malcolm Gladwell's first 3 books as coffee table editions. So I worked with the LA artist Brian Ray, and we did these. So the concentration was on trying to think the opposite way you normally think of a Malcolm Gladwell book, you know, paperback, it's in the airport, you know, thing. Maybe you even rip off half of it and throw it away on your travels if you finish reading it. These have beautiful foil and a cloth and hundreds of Brian's illustrations, title page. And another example of a book design for American Illustration. And in this case, kind of, again, playing with materials and kind of physical aspects of it. So using the basic metaphor of scene for illustration. The jacket is die cut, and the case cover is die cut, and the end page is die cut. And then you see just the first and a little teeny piece of the first and last illustrations in the book, front and back. So when you peel back the jacket, it looks like that, and then when you open the book, it looks like that, and then this. And to make that work, of course, the structure of the book had to change, so the title page and the content in the index are in the inside, in the middle. And I would also say too, you know, things don't have to be laborious just if you're making them by hand. This is a totally digital thing, but it was a poster for the Wall Street Journal. They were doing a Future of Everything festival, and so there was future of food, future of science, and so they asked a number of designers to do it. I was given future of art. And the first thing I did was email them back and say, can I have the future of anything else, please? Because it seemed like impossible. I'm not a big future person. I typically think anybody who thinks is telling you or saying they know what's going to happen tomorrow is trying to sell you something, frankly. Nobody knows. So I certainly didn't know what the future of art is. So I sort of made a joke out of it. So these are all, blue level is all possible future art movements. So De Blois, TK movement, OG school, And when you do that, there's a lot you can play with. Like all those color dots are all future colors that are called like Zax and Gui and Rr and Plug. And there I am with a ridiculous VR helmet. So there are the different layers. But if you think about it, convenience is sort of what it's what it is right now. Everything's about convenience. You know, there are designers, some of you may even be doing it, and if it's you, stop. But you are dedicating your lives to one less click. Who cares? Who cares if there's one less click? Please, don't dedicate your life to that. All right, the last bit of work I'm going to show you is for these guys. They might be giants. I've been working with them for the last 6 or 7 years. This is John Flansburgh on the left and John Linnell on the right, and their hats. If you don't know They Might Be Giants, they started in the early 80s as a guitar, a accordion, and a drum machine. And they started their career this way. They came up with something they eventually called Dial-A-Song. But what they would do is, this is the early 80s, they would take ads out in the Village Voice and with their phone number, and they would just put a different song on the answering machine every day. And I remember the day this happened. I had a super cool upperclassman one day. I was in the studio and he just kind of handed me this little folded piece of paper. It had this number on it, and I was like, totally obsessed. It was just a weird, murky, amazing thing every single day. They hadn't released an album yet, you know, and this led to their first record contract. So, anyway, I listened to this incessantly while I was becoming a graphic design, many of these albums. They've worked with some great people over the years. I did not design these. This is before I was involved with the band, but Flood is probably their best known album. Mike Mills, they worked with Helene Silverman, Barbara Glauber. So this is up into the 90s. And then they lost me. They started doing children's music. Now, their kids' music is great, but I didn't have kids at the time, and I just thought, what are they doing? So this was their first kids' album. So this is about 2000. And then it got weirder. Here come the 1, 2, 3s, and here come the ABCs. And then in 2012, I got an email, here comes science, from John Flansburgh. He had seen some pieces I had done for the New York Times and wanted to see if I wanted to work on their next release. I'm like, anyway, he said, we're not doing the children's music anymore. This new album has a death theme. And at the time it was called Necropolis. They were really getting out of the children's music business. Although I will definitely say that a difference between a They Might Be Giants song for kids and for adults might be just a word, you know? Anyway, this was the first album cover I designed for them. Eventually they changed the title to Join Us. We did this ridiculous pink monster hearse. And just to give you an idea of how I work with the band, so I sent him this, and he's like, I love it, but we're not a Helvetica band. He said that. I said, I know, but it's crushing Helvetica. It's an anti-modernist statement. He's like, it's fantastic, perfect. So all I have to do is convince one person, and then we get to make things. Anyway, so we made that. This is the back cover. I got to design, they've always done vinyl, so I got to design my first vinyl record album, which was cool. This is my futurist label for them. Did a whole bunch of illustrations for the release. And of course it ended up being a postage stamp in iTunes. And then I was like, oh, we're done, but then I didn't want it to be done because this is my favorite band of all time. So I'm like, what else can we do, you know? So, you know, when you get a digital download, there's this PDF you get. It's usually just the liner notes or whatever. Maybe it has lyrics. And I'm like, it's just a PDF, you know? So I'm like, what can we do with that? So let's make instructions to make the cover as a little tabletop paper car, you know. And we didn't know how to do this, and we started, and which was really difficult. But I don't know what it was, but at the end, I was just like, oh, it's just not funny, who cares? So I just changed the title to Make Your Own Life-Size Paper Monster Truck Hearse. And it's a joke because all the instructions are for making this little tabletop model, except I changed the one direction was print this PDF instead of 100% at 3,400%. I had an intern with an old style proportion wheel. He went out and I said, go find a station wagon and measure the length of it. So we just measured the length of this and then came up with 3,400%. That's how we did it, figured out the size. Anyway, we did this, then we made a little video of making it, and then I got thinking about it, and I was like, we probably should just make it. Which we did, and it wasn't that quick, I could tell you. Anyway, this is a 12-foot monster truck hearse that moved, made out of cardboard Epson prints and hot glue. Anyway, it led to our first music video for the band.
I'm so tired of your lies and the evil things you're doing behind my back. Are the crimes that you have never committed? I doubt it sometimes. I wonder when will you die? You're insane. You are bad. You wreck everything you touch and you're a sociopath. There's just one thing that everyone's wondering, when will you die? School children stay at home and all the banks will close. Each year will mark the date on which we celebrate. I know how, I know why. I can picture every part of your comeuppance except for the one remaining piece of the puzzle, which is when you'll die. This is Dan, and that's Dan, and there's Marty on the drums to complete the band. And I'm John, and he is also John, and all of us are wondering when you're gonna die. Still you live, you go on, but you're running out the clock, and if we knew how long, I'd be counting down the days until the lovely one on which you're gone. On that promised morning, we will wake and reach the dawn, knowing that your wicked life is over and that we will carry on. We'll exhale, we'll high five, we will know at last how great it is to be alive. We'll be lining up and buying tickets, and then we'll be jumping up and down on your grave. You're insane, you are bad, you wreck everything you touch and you're a sociopath. And the only way to mitigate would be to know the date you're scheduled to vacate. When are you going to die? Look me in the eye, tell me when you'll die.
Yeah, one take on that. One take is all we had. 6 months. I was giving instructions to my intern, who was then relaying them in Spanish to the operator there. Just, you gotta. Did a great job. Anyway, since this, then it's led to all kinds of stuff. I've been their designer at large, art director at large since. So tons of T-shirts and vinyl and patches and even playing cards, picks, commemorative coins. It's also spilled onto stage, so I've been doing video for the performances, drum kits, and yeah, I mean, it's just been, you know, when you're You know, something as simple as that drum was an Illustrator file. You see it on stage next to one of your heroes. That's pretty cool. I designed the first app for They Might Be Giants. This is the only app you need now. You can get rid of all your other apps, because this one plays 5 They Might Be Giants songs. It's free. Anyway, we worked with a Japanese artist to do this felt cassette thing, so it's all buttons, you know, buttons. And it moves. Yeah, buttons. And many, many other releases. I'll just click through these really quickly, but sorry, I never give it. I got to give you a little heads up that's coming. Anyway, we've done a whole bunch of other videos for them. These were from their album Nanobots. What's the song? They're always experimenting with length, so that was a song. This is also
There, near the borderline, right between two countries. There, near the borderline, right between two countries.
That's also a music video. So because they're short. Decision makers deciding for me. Decision makers decide. Because they're short, they can just be sort of graphic experiments that don't have to be overthought, you know, which I love about them. Another release, recent release with a little die cut there in the middle, Glean, front and back. Label, Conan. Still do CDs, believe it or not. This was for another album called Phone Power. All the typography is made up of typography. And it never gets out of character. I played this out to the bitter end. Every single panel this happens in. So the bottom line, and starting from the Monster Truck Curse thing, one of my favorite aspects of working with the band is it's sort of, I still am working with a client, like traditionally a graphic designer does, but the way projects come about now is very different. Like, I don't wait for them. I come to them and, hey, I got some time, let's do a video. Mainly, they're still an indie band after 30 years, and they're always trying to do things on shoestrings, but it's always, they're a black hole of need in terms of promotion, you know? So in this case, I teach at the School of Visual Arts, and my seniors were like, let's do a video. So I emailed John and said, give us a song off the new album, we'll do a video. He gave us the best song off Nanobots, and it's called Tesla. It's a biography song. They do a number of these obscure presidents. They've done obscure Belgian painters. I guess Tesla is the least obscure. Anyway, the inventor, Nikola Tesla. Anyway, so I don't have any experience, very much cinematography experience, and certainly no film experience, but I really, because of the time period of the subject, I thought, oh, you know, we should shoot actual film, you know, black and white film, so we get dust and scratches and light leak and everything. So this is a Bell & Howell Zoomatic camera. This is the camera that Abraham Zapruder shot the Kennedy assassination with. And you can get them on eBay for like $25, so I bought like 4 of them. They're all hand cranked, there's no electronics at all. And it was a lovely obsession that we had. Everything was shot on 8mm. Some of them, as you'll see, were taken into After Effects and things were done to them. If that happened, we always shot again off the screen again. And I could go into the total inconvenience of 8 millimeter black and white film now, and if you want to talk about that, I'd love to bore you after, but it was awesome. Anyway, we had so many ideas that I'm like, we got all these ideas. Can you do, so we talked them into doing remixes of the song. So because we had all these different video ideas, they ended up doing 9 different remixes of the song for each one of the videos. So it's the tail wagging the dog in a way. Anyway, this is on YouTube, you can check it out. But because of the format, it allowed us this kind of dead space on the side. And what you can do is you can click, it's a YouTube video, you can click each one of these icons, takes you to a different video. So we did a kind of a douchebag Tesla impersonator skater. We electrocuted a teddy bear. We outfitted a portrait of Tesla with light bulbs and then played it to the music. And of course there's a cat video. And this, I won't play this whole thing, but I want to show you this is all 9 at once. So you click on all. Just recently, they brought back Dial a Song, but it's a website now, and they do a song, instead of a song a day on an answering machine, they do a song a week and a video. So this is the new ID we did for Dial a Song. It's parody. And that's found its way onto the kick drum, which is cool. I don't know if they actually do cowbells. They might be giants, but anyway. This is the most recent release. This is sort of, I'm always waiting for the title when there's a release. You know, I can't feel like I can't start designing until I get the name of the album. So John and John go away and they deliberate, and then one fine day they call or email, all right, you ready? It's called My Murdered Remains. That's what it's called. It's like, John, do you ever get the feeling you're trying to scare people away? Anyway, I ended up designing this. They loved it. I think you can see where I was going here. This was all analog again, getting back to the non-convenience thing. It's all cut with a contemporary typeface. And they loved it, done. I think there was a shooting, I think the one in New Orleans, or the one in Las Vegas happened, and they called me and said, you know what, I think we gotta change the name of the album. And I'm like, okay, to what? And they went from My Murdered Remains to I Like Fun. And so we had this discussion, so we gotta rethink the artwork, right? And he's like, why? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Okay, you know. So I have no idea what this means now at all. I mean, I had fun making it, but you know, it's just funny. I think I kind of like it more because of that in a weird way. Anyway, so this, you be careful what you ask for, because then there's all this stuff. I was on a book tour, so I was like in a hotel room in Ohio, you know, doing liner notes, cutting up and waxing things. I had to cut down a T-square to get in my carry-on bag, you know, 10 minutes before something. I mean, it was horrible. It was really terrible. So anyway, but this is the rest of it. So it's all this kind of hundreds of names. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. Again, getting back to the whole, like, having gone through the whole trajectory from the totally analog to the totally digital. And I'm always telling this to my students too. I don't care how you make whatever you make, but I want you to remember that when you're using the computer, you are in a very highly controlled space, right? Software is design. It's a designed environment you're working in. And I can't think of a better example than this one. And so there's so many opportunities to make that aren't gonna be limited to what's going on here. I'm making the liner notes, and I got cut paper all over the place, and I lost Marty Beller. I lost the drummer. I couldn't find his name. And I'm looking all over for him. Let me back up a second. Here's one of the distinctions I'll make before the computer and after. Graphic designers spent all their time trying to line up things. It was all about lining them up. And you had to line up the paper, and then you had to line equipment and everything just to get everything on 90-degree angles. Like, that's what it was all about. And now, if you have to work hard to get it not lined up, like it's the opposite problem. Like, I'm always going to these programs wanting to not have things lined up, and they're lined up all the time. So anyway, the story I want to leave you with is, I'm looking all over for Marty Beller. Do you know where Marty Beller was? He was stuck to the cat. That is not going to happen in design. So I just want to remind you of that. We just finished this. I thought I would show it, but it's the 30th anniversary of Flood, so we're doing a picture disc, which is essentially just repackaging the thing that they did, but we did a back that animates as it spins. And you know, this is not the first time someone has done this, of course, but we didn't have any knowledge of how to do this, so we just sort of had to make it up. But it was so satisfying to get this thing actually working. You know, when you spin it on a record player. Again, it's the little victories. So I just want to leave you with one final video. This is the last one we did for the band.
If only there were some way to shut out all this noise in my head. Oh wait, there already is. It's called McCafferty's bib. I used to have 11 problems, then they all went away when I added one more called McCafferty's bib. Now the gray clouds have arrived, and the gray clouds have decided to stay with us from now on. I ate the whole bottle of pills and wondered what I had swallowed, and I saw that the label said McCafferty's bib. And then all the scenery melted away, and in back of it the only thing left was McCafferty's bib. And the gray clouds have arrived, and the gray clouds have decided to stay with us from now on. In cities all over the world, all the people are suddenly struck by the same idea. They're massing in public squares, and they're singing a note that rises from low to high. With one hand they're holding up signs of Bob Hope, in the other hand everyone's waving McCafferty's bib. The toothpaste won't go back in the bottle since it granted our wish, and we will never be rid of McCafferty's bib.
So, getting back to the larger theme, these guys have been at it for a long time. And yeah, they're like my brother Greg. They just will not stop. And it's not that they don't care what other people think, but they have to make their music their way. And, it's probably stopped them from becoming, fabulously rich and famous. But what is done for them is they have an incredibly strong following, loyal following, and they have found a way to make what they want to make their way. And it's incredibly inspiring for me to work with these guys. So I will leave you with that. I want to give away I wish I could have brought more. They're heavy. But I have stickers for everybody. So, April, how do we determine who gets a copy of this book?
We have a raffle. A raffle.
How do we do that?
I don't know. We need a piece of paper that we number 1 to however many.
All right, do we have a few minutes for
We
questions?
just have one, yeah.
Okay,
We
so,
just have one book for our class and the other for.
oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. The other one's a raffle. If
Sure.
wants to take the time to write numbers.
All right, no, I've got a number between 1 and 50 in my head. Give me some numbers. Shout out numbers.
35.
43.
19. 67. 8.
42.
It's 49.
28.
13.
33.
39.
All right, who said 42? All right, you were closest, it was 41. So, we'll do it that way. Okay, so I would just say take a few stickers to help me spread some love here. LA needs it, right? Take a few, pass them on. Yeah. Hold on, guys. Go ahead.
When you make them analog, like the later thing with all the cutting of the type, how many versions of that would you go through, or do you make one?
I don't just make one, no. Many. And that one was weird because I probably make it sound like I'm using a T-square all the time. I'm not. So I had to buy those. I had to buy that equipment because I don't have any more. So there was a lot of trial and error with that one. It started digital, that one, with type that was sort of chopped up, and then I think it just evolved into that at a certain point, and it just got much more interesting to me once the light was hitting it. The Monster Truck Hearse project. It looks so fast because it's sped up or whatever. That was 6 months. We had to drive an hour and a half up to Connecticut to build it and then drive back. It almost bankrupted the studio. I mean, it was really, it was almost a Donner Party at the end there. It was getting cold. It was, it really was getting, and we had spent, thousands of dollars.
Did you actually work on building it, or just have your interns?
Oh God, yeah, every day. Yeah, I was the lead. Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Speaking of the monster truck, you had that foldable schematic, the one looks like you could like cut out and fold for a coffee table. Does that exist somewhere? Does that actually work?
Oh, you mean the PDF to build the little one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it's online. You can get it. Just type in, if you want to build a little one. But the funny thing about that was that I was a naive idiot going into it just like anybody else would be, I suppose. I should have known better. But once I decided, oh, we'll just build it big. Well, there was no internal structure designed. It was designed to, that's the thing that I think people don't get. It's like the big version isn't a big version of a monster truck. It's a big version of the little one that we designed, right? So it's really boxy. It's exactly 3,400% of the smaller one. So we had to stop at a certain point and go, oh, we got to figure out some internal structure because this thing is not. We went up there. The guy printed it. It took like 70 hours to print everything. Like he printed everything at 3,400%. He had a large scale printer. And he was just charging us cost. But we got up there with like 6 people and some cardboard boxes and some hot glue, and it took all day, and we didn't even get half a tire built. And then I realized this thing is not gonna, what are we doing here, you know? So it was really, we just really did not have a plan. But I think in the best way. I think half the time too as designers, we're always like, oh, we've gotta have a plan, and we gotta know what this thing is before we start, you know? It just gets rid of it. If you get an assignment, there's anxiety, because you don't know what this thing, what can this thing be, right? It's the absolute wrong thing to do to try to imagine what it is right away. Design is a process for finding out. If you already knew it was going to be before you started, why even bother, in my view. So I think it takes a lot of courage to sort of let the process unfold and trust that you're going to get somewhere interesting. With that thing, I kept going, what's this thing going to look like? Huge. I mean, it might look horrible, you know? And it sort of did look horrible, but it looked horrible good, I think. But I didn't, you know, other than going out and measuring a station wagon, we were just like, and then just it all printed out. We're like, okay, let's start making this thing and we'll see what's going to happen. But I feel like that's everything we do as designers. You have to trust the process is going to get you somewhere interesting. Because if you try to circumvent that and try to get, know before it's time to know. So half the time my students are like, I'm totally lost. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, cheers. You're exactly where you should be. Now, not right before the thing's due, but halfway through, if you have no clue what you're doing, that's exactly where you're supposed to be.
And I have one more thing. You mentioned, this was interesting to me. I'm not a designer, actually. I'm a musician. There was a lot of you take this class, but you talked about how you, the band, they were your clients. And at some point, when you're talking about how you called them up and said, when your students wanted to make a video, it seemed like the situation reversed. Suddenly, you were calling them for material to do a job for you. Yeah. So the roles got reversed.
Well, and I don't know.
How does that work out? It sounds like you have more of like a collaborative kind of like.
Absolutely. But Flansburgh, my main guy, he's went to Pratt. He's an art student. They're an art band. So both him and Linnell are artists and musicians. It's like there is I don't know if it was the period. Maybe it's happening now. You'd probably know better than I. But certainly at that time, David Byrne, their whole Pete Townsend was an art school kid. A lot of these guys were coming not from the music. They were coming from this other place. And for a pop band, it just happened to inform it in this different way. Not everybody, but I think that was these guys for sure. But I think the analogies between music and design, there are a lot of similarities. There are differences, of course, but I feel like it's really the same, I feel like. You know, you can, you know, if you're learning guitar, you can learn to play like, I don't know, name a great guitarist, Jimi Hendrix. And you can concentrate on not having a voice at all. And I mentioned April in school, I was ripping her off so bad, like as a student. I was tearing that stuff apart and trying to figure out how you were doing what you were doing and try to replicate it. No, this just isn't anywhere near as good, you know, over and over and over again. Well, I think, you know, you then have to find your own voice. You have to find your way of doing it. Just the way April did, I hope it's just the way I did, you know. And I feel it's the same with music. I think there's, you know, so much of it is already established, and then it's what you do with that already established thing that becomes yours.
And then it builds into somebody as far as yourself.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Anybody else?
No, but you're going to die for having done all that with my work. We're trying to later, not now.
Yes.
At some point.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all. It was